Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Indigo Manulife Center. Tonight, we are very pleased to present a very special event. We are welcoming you behind the curtain of the 2013 Scotiabank Giller Prize. And here we have our jurors, and of course, a very familiar voice and a face. He is an author. He is a musician, and of course, the host of CBC's Q. And of course, tonight, our host. So please put your hands together for Gian Gomeshi.
Thank you. Hi. Nice to see you, everybody. Okay, I think I'm going to sit here and then read this. No, I'm going to, you stay there. That's right. You didn't see anything because I'm going to do glamorous introductions of everybody. Hi, thank you so much for coming. We've been looking forward to this night, and particularly to tomorrow morning when the shortlist is announced, and to next month when the Giller Prize 2013 is handed out. My name is Gian Gomeshi. It is hard to believe this is the 20th year of the prize that has changed the literary landscape of this country, and it really has. They grow up so quickly. It's been 2 decades already. Let's think about all that's happened since Jack Rabinovich shook the hand of the first winner, M.G. Pasanji, 20 years ago. I'll just pause there very briefly to say you may know that this prize was established by Jack Rabinovich, and he happens to be right here tonight, right there. So say hello to Jack. Jack, give us a little wave. There he is. Jack established the prize to honor his wife, the remarkable Doris Giller, a literary critic who was renowned for her keen and insightful writing about Canadian literature. It was for the country's best fiction, and there was a substantial purse. This was a prize that would take no prisoners and was going to celebrate good writing in style. 20 winners. Remember the infamous year 2 books shared the prize, and Jack changed the rules. Those books come from short lists, and then in the last few years, long lists too, of more than 200 novels and short story collections. It's a lot of words and a lot to celebrate. A lot of reading for the 60 people who have served as Giller jurors over the past 2 decades. So this year's jurors are only the latest brave readers to take on this challenge. They've picked the long list. Tomorrow, we'll learn their short list, but their work isn't over yet. They still have to choose the winner. A Herculean task, moving from 13 works of fiction to only 5, and then to the winner. It happens every year. This is the first time we're getting a glimpse behind the curtain. That's what we're calling it. This being the curtain. Depending on where you're standing, we're behind it. We have this year 3 jurors with us tonight. Giller jurors have never actually gone public before. So we're not sure how much they'll reveal, but it's definitely an historic occasion. So I'm going to introduce the 2013 Scotiabank Giller jury. She is a winner of the Scotiabank Giller Prize. She won in 2011 for her second novel, Half-Blood Blues. She's an internationally acclaimed author whose work has been nominated for many literary awards, including the Man Booker Prize. Her work has been included in several major anthologies, including Best New American Voices. She joins us from Victoria, British Columbia. Please welcome Essie Adujan. Nice to see you, Essie.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
We hugged and kissed backstage. It's not like, this isn't the first time we've said hello. It seemed kind of cold. It's like, okay, sit down. He hails from Brooklyn, New York. He's the author of best-selling novels, short stories, and essays. He's recently written about his love for the band Talking Heads, who happen to be the best band ever. His novel, Motherless Brooklyn, won the National Book Critics Circle Award and a Salon Book Award. He's just released his 9th novel, Dissident Gardens, which is riding the bestseller list. Please welcome Jonathan Lethem. And she is a literary icon who is the author of more than 50 volumes of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. She's no stranger to the Scotiabank Giller Prize. This is her 4th time on the jury. It's a lot of times. She's also took home the award in 1996 for her novel Alias Grace, and was nominated for her novels Oryx and Crake and The Year of the Flood. She's just released her highly anticipated 3rd novel, the 3rd in a trilogy, Mad Adam. If you've not read it yet, it is outstanding. It's garnering raves around the world. Please welcome Margaret Atwood.
Right.
All right. Well, I guess the way this is supposed to, we've never done this before, so we're going to just try this out. But I guess the way this is supposed to work is I'm going to ask a few questions and reveal something, try and understand a little bit about the jury process and what these three humans have been through in recent weeks, trying to narrow down this prestigious prize. And then we perhaps might have time to take questions from you folks as well. I'm making that up. Is that okay? Yeah, okay, good. All right, so my first question is to Margaret Atwood. And what is on the short list this year?
You know better than that. We're telling that tomorrow morning.
Right. I just thought I would try it. You seem like somebody who'd be easy to get something passed like that.
Is that because I'm old and losing my mind? Is that-
No, that was me being sarcastic, playful.
Right.
I actually want to start with Jonathan because Margaret and Essie have won this prize. You're an American, so you're
Well,
not.
You would have. if
You're
you
not
been
actually
Canadian,
eligible, even
yes.
if you even if you wanted to win, you cannot. What made you want to be a juror for this prestigious Canadian prize?
Well, a whole bunch of things. I was flattered into it. I mean, when they called and said that it was the 20th anniversary and therefore they wanted to do something extraordinary, I felt I was halfway home, right? And Margaret had already consented, and I'm not only, I mean, I began reading your books when I was 17 or 18 years old, but also on top of my admiration, I've had the tonic to my admiration, which is that we have become sort of friends, and I've gotten to see you here and there, and I thought doing this with you would be terrific and interesting. At that point, you hadn't agreed yet, but they were going to search for another. Their scheme was one American and two super prominent Canadians, and I thought I'll be that American. That makes sense. I'll be that that token in this case. And I also, you know, I lived in Toronto a little bit. So the connection here is meaningful to me, and the chance to visit was an opportunity. I'll be seeing friends and just seeing places I care about, and I do feel connected to North American literary culture beyond our own borders, beyond U.S. borders. It makes sense to me. I mean, I was just talking today. I was asked by the Globe and Mail. I think they have a feature about reading influences, and so it was my turn to do this. And I realized how much Robertson Davies, for instance, had mattered to me as a younger teenager before I'd been encountered Margaret's work. And of course, I didn't have borders in my. I didn't even always know when a book was translated back then. It was just a great writer, you know. And so, in a way, this gesture to me reconnects me to that feeling of what do the borders mean when it comes to literature? They don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in short, you wanted to be a juror to hang out with Margaret Atwood.
Exactly.
You get
Very,
to,
very transparent.
You get to do
not
that
that
without
transparent,
even
actually.
being a juror.
Do you think that as an American, you will have some sort of perspective on Canadian literature that a Canadian author wouldn't have?
No. I mean, I can't think of how I would have any particular. I mean, the only possibility is if I don't know, if someone were coasting to the long list on just a kind of a cumulative reputation, or that everyone felt they were such a nice person, and I was oblivious to that, I could maybe be the subtle antidote to someone just sliding in with a subpar book from a well-liked writer. But I don't think we were in that situation, or even close to it. So I can't think of any other thing that, you know, in other words, my ignorance is of no particular use in this situation.
So the winner of the 2013 Giller Prize won't be a subpar book from a well-liked author. Margaret Atwood, it's perhaps no surprise that, I mean, it's always, I think, a thrill for the Giller to have you as a juror. But being on the jury this year meant that your book, which is getting raves around the world, Mad Adam, could not be in contention.
Yes, that's true, but I don't think it would have been in contention anyway.
Oh, is that right?
It's the wrong kind of book. But I've done this before, and I've actually I've done the Giller 3 times, and the third time I said, okay, that's it, I've done my 3, I'm never doing it again, I'm too old. And then Jack got hold of me. He twisted my arm.
What do you mean Mad Adam is not the kind of book that would
Well,
be in contention?
We could go into that at some length, but we won't. Let's just say that you get a feel for these things.
Right. It's not because it's a subpar book by a well-liked author. Is it?
It's a weird book by a contentious author, but that doesn't stop people either. Let's see, Oryx and Crake was actually shortlisted for a lot of things, but when it came to a choice between something with a sort of perky, upbeat thing about it, and a book in which almost the entire human race is annihilated, you know, people shied at the jump. You know, they turned their horse aside and went around that one. You can see their point.
So you might want to stop writing about the apocalypse then.
I don't know.
Well, it truly is. I know I sound like I'm gushing, but I think it's a gush-worthy book. If you've read Mad Adam, it is just outstanding. And I'm not saying that just to one-up Jonathan Latham and the cozying up to you on stage. Essie, you won this prize only 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like being on this side of the Scotiabank Giller Prize?
It's a little less nerve-wracking. I think it's interesting though to see how you know, because when you win a prize, you of course feel like, you know, it's amazingly gratifying, and you feel like, oh, that's, you know, that's yeah, it just gives you, you know, a sort of you know, kind of confidence in your work, and which it should, you know, but I think that it's interesting to see just the mechanics of being on the jury of any prize. You know, just to see, I'm not really expressing myself all that well, but it's just interesting to see what's going on, you know, kind of behind the curtain, and what the different stages are, and how certain books, you know, make their way to the long list, and how they make their way to the short list, and I think, you know, without, you know, having had any kind of experience of this, it just gives me kind of yeah, I'm not really expressing myself very well.
Some perspective.
Some perspective, exactly,
yeah,
on the
we get
prize,
that.
because I mean, you can kind of walk away feeling sort of, you know, that first moment, that first rush where you feel so sort of, you know, just kind of, not to say that this deflated me or anything like that, but just to say that it gives me perspective, and that there were so many wonderful books that we read, you know, this round. That there's so much wonderful writing coming out of so many different corners of our country, and
You had thought of your book as a winner, and now you think of it as a survivor.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's a nice
exactly.
way to put it. Yeah.
Yes, well,
yeah.
it's actually nothing to do with you. If your book wins a prize, you have not done, it's like being best pumpkin in show. I mean, the pumpkin is inert. It's just sitting there. Somebody else chooses it. Your work was done before the book was published, and probably not with the intention of winning a prize.
Exactly, and when you think of just the amount of, you know, truly wonderful novels that you've read that, you know, you weren't able to include on the long list, and this gives you a sense of sadness and of perspective.
It's a very rich year.
This year.
In writing, yes. This year is very, I mean, some years, and having done it before, I can say this, some years there's a kind of obvious, you know, these are the ones. This year, There were more than that. So we had to make, as you say, we had to make some decisions.
Okay.
Because we only could have 13.
Let me ask you about the mechanic. First of all, we found our tagline, I think, for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, Best Pumpkin in Show. Sort of a catchy ad tagline. Essie, you're talking about understanding the mechanics of this. There's this year 147 books
Yeah.
were submitted by 61 publishers.
Didn't we call more in?
What's
Yeah,
that?
we
Yeah.
read more than that.
We read
You
more
read more
because
than
we
that, right?
called some
Okay,
in. Yeah.
now you're getting macho. It's like, so how does that work? I mean, do a bunch of books appear in boxes at your? That's literally what happens.
Yes.
And how do you even approach handling that, Jonathan?
Well, the first thing you do is you look at them all. You've got this interesting chaos that suddenly burst into your space, and all the things. You become very conscious of how books present themselves. First and foremost, it's big, it's small, it's trying to look sexy, it's trying to look hip, it's and then you take a deep breath and you just start opening them, and then you remember, oh, this is about reading, and it's about my own appetites and interests. And just when you're feeling overwhelmed and at sea, you realize that the only compass is also the most radically simplifying one. If I'm not compelled, I'm the judge. If I'm not engaged, if I'm not swept up, I think something's wrong. And until one of your fellows adamantly says, well, you missed on that one, go back and have another look, you get to put it aside. When a book starts, disappointing you or wearing you down in the wrong way, or, there are a lot of other books to look at, and so you switch.
At
You
what
start
point?
looking
At
other
what
books.
point might that happen? I mean, do you?
I personally I never had a system or a threshold marker. There were books that I read for 50 pages. There were books I read for 100. There were books I read for 200, even without completing them. There were other books that I completed, but with a kind of waning feeling.
Well,
Where
I was
I
gonna-
got, I was caught up as a reader, but at some level, before the end, it had clicked into me that this was not going to be, in my idea of it wasn't going to be in the conversation unless someone else really put it there.
I've always wondered this. I mean, I remember Michael Enright saying 3 years ago, after being on the jury, I will never do that again because it is so. I mean,
It's
that's
enormous,
a lot of
yeah.
books.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, and to take nothing away from how hard that would have been, when you only read 50 pages, is there any sort of guilt factor of well, maybe this book I'm going to miss something that's going to happen later
Well,
on?
there's, for me anyway. Others can weigh in. There are two or three things that counteract that anxiety or that guilt. One is, first of all, I know myself. I'm a very eager reader. I want every book to work. I always try to situate, and I think I do by my nature, because I'm not a critic. I'm not very hard on, I love books and I love novels and I'm a novelist, and I sort of innately want every book to work, and when it sets up as terms, I think, great, let's go. I'm rooting for them. The other thing is, the ones that I'm very reluctant to stop reading books. So when I petered out after 50 pages, something was really wrong. And even then, I'll sit and I'll make sure, did I just not have a meal today, or do I need, what's wrong here? But the ennui, the feeling that there's no way this book can't win me over. It can't do it. I wait for that sensation to be certain. But I also have these two at my back who will call me on it if I've missed an important
Essie,
book.
did you have a strategy when these 147 books ended up on your doorstep?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say that it was done very mercifully. Like, I feel like, they came at they came at intervals. It wasn't
In
like
increments?
147 came in a gigantic crate or anything like that. So it was really, really well, lovingly planned. But I would say that I did have a strategy in that I wanted to make sure that I gave every single book 100 pages. Like, even if I read, the first 2 pages and I thought, this is just not for me. I really felt that it was, really very important to make sure that I'd given the book, enough of a chance, which to me was about 100 pages in, where I could say, with great certainty that this book wasn't working for one reason or the other, or maybe it just, it didn't appeal to me, or, there was something. But just because I know that, it could be, as you're saying, a question of mood. It could be a case where maybe, and this was rare, but sometimes you did have a book that wasn't, that got off on the wrong foot. Maybe it hadn't been, edited to the degree that it could have been edited, and the first maybe chapter or two were a bit lagging, and then you could kind of, picked up pace. But yeah, it was very important to me.
Once you've read the 100 pages or more,
Yes.
do you start to make a list? Do you make piles of the good ones and the...
Yeah, so in my office, which is, it's not very large, but, have this, they're all kind of still piled there, and there are various piles of, this was a maybe, this was a, a yes, this was a, a definite no, and, they sat in there.
How many made it to the yes?
13.
What's your progress or process?
Okay, I'll read anything. Quite literally. I read the backs of cereal boxes. And I peek at the ends. I don't always peek at the ends, but I've been known to peek at the ends. I've also been known to start in the middle and read towards both ends.
What do you mean you've been known to? Meaning, do you do this?
I mean that people have caught me out doing it. Because you're not supposed to, and I do know that. So I did have 3 piles, and they were called Not Very Likely, Maybe Possibly, and I'll take somebody else's advice on this, and I feel quite good about these. But it is like a long horse race, because and a relay race as far as that goes, because you get the first bunch, maybe 50 or so, and you think, wow, these are the ones I really like, and you put them in the really quite possible pile. But then other boxes arrive, and then more books come that bump some of those out. So they bump them out of the really quite strong into the maybe possibly.
When do you know that something's going in the, and how do you know something's going in the not very likely pile?
Probably after the group phone calls that we had.
No, when do you know, in terms of the 3 piles you made?
Oh, my piles. When do I know? That's like that awful question. Like, how do you know a book is finished? Okay, let me channel it a bit.
What are the ingredients of a book that might end up being in the
Feel the
not
vibration.
very likely pile?
You have a banana and you sort of walk.
It's just like interviewing you. So then what happens? You guys have all, you've gotten these books, you've sort of made your piles, your little lists, you have a sense of what's working for you. How do the deliberations happen? Are there conference calls? How many? Do you get in a room together? Is it like the papal thing with the smoke? Like, how does it?
We did have smoke.
You did have smoke.
But the smoke happens actually in November, the major smoke. When we actually
Pick the winner.
the big reveal.
Yeah. How does it work, Essie, the deliberations?
We did a lot through email, actually. I found
We
that
did a
there
lot
was,
through
there was
email
a lot of
and-
emailing back and forth.
The phone.
Yeah, and then maybe we had about 4 conference calls to kind of clarify things and narrow things down. But yeah, it was all very civil.
We live in quite widely separated parts of the continent, so it was hard to get together over neighborhood coffee, but we could get together over neighborhood emails
Right.
and phone calls.
And what was the dynamic, Jonathan, amongst the group? Any surprises?
These two were at each other's throat, and I was just constantly having to calm them down and separate them. No, The first thing was a conference call. I think the bulk of the work in the end was on these reply all emails, but it started with getting to know each other and talking. And we talked not only about the books, but about methodology. I mean, to me, one of the compelling things about this experience is that whatever structure has been offered to you is only a beginning. The three have to decide, it's like a game where the first thing you have to make up are the rules. We had to decide how we were going to proceed within the structure and what we wanted to say and how soon we wanted to hear from one another about things. And so there's this interesting double conversation. There's the beginning of talking about the books, but there's talking about how to do what we're doing. And then once we'd gotten a feel for those, our wishes and what we were comfortable with, then the emails become very shorthand. Suddenly you're just putting bunches of names of books in places, and for a while it's about just lists. We were communicating like in a kind of Morse code. And
Sorry,
then,
did you establish common criteria then? Did you have sort of?
well, I wouldn't. I'll speak for us for a moment, but you guys should weigh in on this too. I wouldn't say it was about some sort of final consenting to what the criteria were to be, but it was just hearing enough from each other to gain a sense of what the conversation was going to be like and how the other minds worked in the room. If we'd needed to agree on every fine point of criteria, that conversation might never have finished. But we needed to have a feel for one another's kind of framework, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot of, or a little bit anyway, discussion about what constitutes good writing. Is it, exquisite sentences? Is it, seriousness of purpose? What exactly is it? And we didn't really come to a consensus of, okay, these 5 things make for a wonderful novel. I mean, it was never like that, but just discussing it.
I think novels can be wonderful in widely different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, Moby Dick, Pride and Prejudice.
You said you weren't going to reveal the winner, Margaret.
Which one of those two is it?
So it's Moby Prejudice.
I haven't been on the I haven't been on the Polaris jury, the Giller jury, but I've been on the Polaris grand jury for that's the insider thing where we pick the album of the year, and I can tell you that everybody in that room, it gets quite, everybody has the same intent. We really want to pick the record that we believe is best, quiet the noise, nothing else, and really, really just musically decide but it still gets really heated. The stakes feel really high. How heated did it get between the three of you?
And we didn't end up yelling at each other. I think there were a few, I'll slit my wrists if, like that. And horse trading took place. But as I say, there were a lot more good books than there were places. So there were 13, that was it, tops, and we could not squish and cram any more into it than that.
Is that your perspective too?
Yeah.
That-
I would say that no,
You got-
that's
Were there
I'm
any?
just saying that.
Was there any moment of incredulity? Like, did you ever think, I can't believe this person picked that book? That makes no sense to me.
Yes.
Do you care to say which person it
No.
was? You don't have to name the books. I'm just curious. If there
Oh,
was
no, we all had those moments. So each of us had our own moments. That you see what goes on?
That's actually a recording of one of the deliberations.
Otherwise, there wouldn't have been any horse trading.
Well, I'll get to the horse trading, but Jonathan, you seem to
So it's
feel
the
like
threats-
there were.
I know that there was a thing I liked that Margaret couldn't believe I liked.
I could believe you liked it, but not for this purpose.
Okay, yeah, right. That's right.
And so, what was that like when Margaret Atwood, somebody that you've spoken about so eloquently that you admire, so disagrees with you over a book in your jury deliberations?
I mean, I'm a little stronger than your question proposes at this point. I've been disagreed with by a lot of wonderful people who I respect, but no, I mean it's what we were there to do, and I mean the great thing was that I think at the center of what became the long list, there were a number of things that there was a Venn diagram of things we'd all felt some real enthusiasm for. And so we knew we were in the same room, and that's a consolation. If we'd each come with completely non-overlapping lists of 13, we would have been in just a bewildering atmosphere, but that wasn't our situation.
What does the horse trading mean? How did that play itself out?
If this happens, I will jump out the window. But on the other hand, if it doesn't happen, I'll give this thing to you, that if it doesn't happen, you will jump out the window. It's like that.
So bartering.
Yeah, horse trading.
And
That's what
how
horse
did you
trading-
find that part of the process, Essie?
She got her way.
Oh, I don't know. I feel like it's always challenging when you have different personalities and you're coming at things from different perspectives, and that you have different books that you feel extremely passionate about, But I mean, one of my favorite parts of the process is just hearing somebody describe why they feel so passionately towards a book. So it's I can't believe that I got to to talk books with Margaret Atwood and Jonathan Lethem, and talk about them so intimately and for such long stretches. And so that
You can't believe it, and yet you seem to have gotten your way, according to those two.
She made concessions earlier.
Right, it's good strategy.
This is why it's horse trading, you see?
Just let me zoom out for a second, and sort of on a more macro level. You're all authors, and all very successful authors. How hard is it to judge another writer's work? This isn't somebody asking you to blurb on the back of their book. This is judging that's going to, a prize that's going to change people's lives.
Let me put it this way. Do you give blood?
You're scaring me. Are you horse trading? Yes, I've given blood.
So you give blood so that the institution of people giving blood will continue. Do you not? To help other people.
Yes.
Yes. I rest my case. I
I don't
it's-
understand what you
okay,
meant.
all of these things, book reviewing, prize judging.
A necessary part of the process.
Even, interviewing authors on the radio, authors interviewing each other, sitting on panels. Kill myself, I hate panels. All of this kind of thing is part of the overall picture of books, authorship, making a space, making it possible,
Right.
making it more possible for it all to appear on the earth.
That's
as
why
it
you
were.
do it.
That is
But the question was, how hard is it?
well, that is really not something you can think about very much while you're doing it. I mean, while you lie there with the tube coming out of your arm, do you think this is hard? Or do you think, I wonder if they'll give me a cookie?
Well, see, I actually think about the cookie. You're right, but it's an
We do
interesting
get the
analogy
cookie.
because.
We get to go to this wonderful dinner party, don't we? That's the cookie.
But if you're giving blood, something is being extracted from within your body. That's the way you feel about.
If you're judging, something
other
is
people.
being extracted from within your mind.
Well, hours are being extracted from your
Exactly.
calendar.
Days are being extracted. Months.
Jonathan, what about you? How hard is it for you to judge another
I
writer's work?
don't think, I liked Margaret's answer very much in the sense that it is, at its base, a vote of participation in the culture of literature. It's saying, I'm part of a community. Really to refuse to sit in judgment, say to never review a book or to never be on a jury, might seem, I don't know, somehow like you're being honorable in some fancy way, but really you're saying, I won't play. It's to care enough that there should be a literary culture, there should be awards, there should be reviews, and enunciating your own feelings about other people's books in these different contexts is to acknowledge that there are other books. It's to not be in the solipsistic world of the author, which,
I see.
you know,
And that it's important enough for you to give your time.
Right.
yeah.
It's important enough for you to give your blood. It's important enough for you to give your time.
Well, obviously, it's a very fraught thing. I mean, it's difficult to feel that you. I mean, that you're, I guess, sitting in judgment over your fellow authors. But I guess I would agree that it is. We do have a sort of peer assessment situation set up for a reason, because who but other authors would really have a good sense of just what is good in a novel. I mean, these are people who write novels and who read novels and who are obsessed with novels, and these are their lives. And so it's I feel like that's it's a good system.
You've all sat on panels and juries before. Is there something that makes the Giller Prize jury unique, Jonathan?
That's a good question. Well, I think its eminence in its context is, for me, I was once on the National Book Award jury in the U.S., which is proposed as the summit, but there's also the Pulitzer. But I think it seems to me that the Giller has really got this quality of being the Oscar. So that's distinctive. I don't think it makes the operation of the experience of what we did so very different, but it felt important. I was really, and that, when you talk about what's sacrificed or the difficulties or irritations even of just, not another box, whatever, but I felt I was doing something that mattered, and that carries you, in life when you have that feeling. It carries you through all sorts of things.
Margaret, is the Giller Prize different in terms of the jury process?
People will yell at you more because of the choice that you make, because it's important, and people are awaiting. They're awaiting the short list. They awaited the long list. I don't think we got a lot of screaming about that. But as it gets more towards the short list and then the final, emotions get heated, and there is nothing that well, there probably are a few things, but matters of difference of taste can get people very
Exercised.
yes, as you yourself have experienced. It's not like a sprint in which there is a camera and a string. You can tell who won. This is a matter of taste, and taste is always subjective.
Just out of curiosity, because this is your fourth time, have there been, in any of the other years that you've been on the jury, have you revisited the decision in your mind later and thought about the winner that you picked and questioned it in any way?
Well, it wasn't just me picking.
Exactly. That's part of the reason I'm asking.
No, I think every time we arrived at a decision that I personally have been able to live with. Happily. I've lived with it happily. So on no occasion did I feel I'm going to jump out the window because of what we arrived at. And I know we won't this time either, because these are all good books.
Well, tomorrow, we're going to see each other at 11 a.m. and the announcement will be made of the shortlist, the 5 books that are in contention for the Scotiabank Giller Prize 2013. And I know you can't give away too much, obviously, but can you speak to some of the qualities that we can expect to find in the books on the shortlist? trying to find ways into this without, you know.
They're good.
Essie?
I think it's quite a diverse list of books. Yeah, I think, you know, not one is like another, I guess. And of course, you know, all very well written, I mean, it's a terrific list. It was a terrific long list, and it's a great short list. So.
Yeah. I would have said something very much like Essie, that there's nothing about the five that will reveal some principle, organizing, overarching concept. It's that they're all just have a quality of being individual and sort of undeniable on their terms. It was, you know, they each demanded to be, you know, on that list.
Do you guys think, honestly, do you think people will be surprised tomorrow?
Well, somebody's always going to be surprised no matter what you do.
Yes.
I
So
love
you
that
think
word,
some-
surprise.
right.
Yes, well, I mean,
Thank
it's
you
sort
for
of
the
like being
technical
in
answer.
school. I'm really surprised that you, et cetera, et cetera.
What do you think, John?
I think the answer to that is yes.
Essie?
Yeah, I think so too. But I mean, I agree with Margaret in that, you know, everything always feels surprising, even when it's expected. It's, oh, I can't
But there's
believe
been
that
some
that's
talk
expected.
of front runners. There's been some books that people do expect to see there, and so it will
But
be.
which people?
Some people. I've got a couple more thoughts, but I want to just test to see in the crowd before it gets too late. If there's anybody who wants to ask any questions, by all means. This is, please, yes.
Two questions. If you can't answer the first one, I'll take the second one. First question is, what's the best Canadian book you've read this year?
Oh, unfair. we
Sorry.
can't answer that
I
because
figured.
obviously not. That's very sneaky.
That's right. Then the second question is, what is the best book that you've read this year?
No, I don't think we're not going there.
Unquestionably, Moby Prejudice was the
What about a
Pride
non-Canadian
and
book?
Dick.
Would that be that
It doesn't
satisfying?
have to be Canadian. It could just be any book. What's the best book you've read this year?
Oh, I think there's much better things to talk about than that, because we're not going to talk about that. You've put us in a position of saying, okay, so the best book is either a Canadian book or not a Canadian book. If it is a Canadian book, we can't talk about it because we're judges on the Giller. If it's not a Canadian book, what kind of Canadians are we?
That would be a surprise. A non-Canadian book.
Yeah, no,
a
that
book
would
that
be
wasn't
good.
on the long list.
Yes, there you are.
Wins. Yeah.
We have a question right here. I did the math on my phone, and if there were 150 books, it means that you had 2.4 days to read and make notes on each one. And I know, Essie, you have a small child at home. I just wondered if you could speak to, although reading is a pleasure, when you have that much to read in a very specified time, and all of these people waiting to hear your answer, how did you manage your daily lives? How did you go about that?
Well, I think at some point I felt like, okay, my eyes are bleeding. There's actually, but it was something where I had to set aside, obviously, my own creative work in order to get the reading done. This took over, months of work were sort of shelved for that. But it was, speaking as somebody who, I won the prize 2 years ago, and it's completely changed my whole publishing career. It was extremely important for me to take the task very seriously and give every single book its fair shake, and go into every book wanting to fall in love with the book, even while it was resisting. So, or if it just, you read something and it completely blew you away. Like, there were just so many wonderful different moments, but it did mean, sort of shutting down. Something had to give. So. How about you?
I went into this process partly willing to take it on because I knew this was destined to be kind of a not. I'd finished a book, or I was finishing a book at the very beginning of the year, and I knew that my fate was to have a kind of a non-writing summer and spring, and so it occupied exactly the space that a deep engagement on a novel would have. I was retreating into my study, and neglecting my family in the usual way, but for an unusual reason. But you can read a lot if you've actually made it not a marginal activity. We read so often while we wait online or as we fall asleep or just in interstitial times. But if you say these 2 hours are reading hours, you can read 100 pages of 5 or 6 books in that time. If you really decided that's what you're doing, you can go at it.
Margaret, I'm curious about you. I don't understand how you do all the things you do. You were finishing Mad Adam.
No, I'd finished
You'd
it.
finished Mad Adam.
Yeah, I'm not crazy.
So it was sort of similar to Jonathan?
Yeah, very
You
similar to
understood,
Jonathan.
you saw that there was
Yes,
a little window.
Yes. Yeah, no, I couldn't, you can't write and do this too. It's not possible.
Do you read at all when you are writing? Do you read other books?
I read newspapers, but, I'm subject to temptation, so if there's something lying around, I'll probably read it.
Do you, Jonathan?
I do. I read fiction, but not in this volume. But for me, I need the replenishment of other voices and remembering what the context for my efforts is. So I'm always reading fiction.
Do you read things do you pick things that you want in percolating in your brain that might influence you as a writer?
Some of it is selected to nourish the particular project, but in a more general sense, I just want to be reading things that excite me, that have just got the synapses going.
What about you, Essie? When you're writing, do you read?
I do read, but I feel like the only things that I can read are, I read fiction, but it has to very much be in the vein of what I'm writing. So, and it never is, because what you're writing is, it never really, looks like anything else. So I find that I'm constantly, reading half of a novel here and, tossing it there and reading another half to get something different from it and, tossing it there. So, yeah, just a lot of half-read fiction books lying about.
And we have a question right here.
Essie made a comment about wanting to fall in love with the book that you're reading, but obviously each of you was coming into the process with your own pre-existing tastes and things that you enjoy reading. So I wondered, A, whether you could talk a little bit about what kind of novels you enjoy reading, and also, I know that I've had the experience of reading novels that you can tell they're really good, but they're just not your taste. And how did you sort of manage that situation where you can tell that something is really, it's really remarkable, it's well deserving of the praise that it's receiving, but it's just not your favorite to read?
That's a good question. Anybody in particular you want to hear from on that?
Yeah, so taste is subjective. We all know that. But you can make accommodations for other people's taste if they make a convincing case for it. Okay, you can say, well, okay, this isn't my very fave, but I can see why it's good. So it goes like that. But as for what, I don't have a kind of book that I confine myself to. I really will read just about anything. And all you ask of a book is that it succeed on its own terms.
Yeah.
So you ask of it the same kind of thing you might ask of an apple. You ask that it be a good apple. You do not ask that it be a fish. Now, it so happens that for the kind of prize we're giving, some fish are just not going to, it's not going to be them, no matter what, because they're a fish. And we're looking at the apples, the pears, and the cabbages, and maybe the, chickens or something. But then there's the fish. So you just know it won't be them. And then you wonder what was going on in the minds of the publishers, actually. Not that I didn't read those, because I did.
Jonathan, I'm just curious to hear from you on that question.
Well,
that's an interesting question.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I agree. Of course, you can recognize. I mean, as a baseline condition, I honestly feel I would echo Margaret in that I don't have a kind of book I prefer. I have a very embracing appetite for fiction. I always have, and I've always read across categories and genres and lengths of novels or short stories, and I don't feel very anxious that I have some giant blind spots. When books are terrific, I can usually also really relish it. So I would sort of validate my own Catholicism, right, in that way, going in. But I also think that it's the case that while you can be persuaded up to a point by someone's argument that something is doing something very well on its terms, if you don't like those terms, and at the very end, we'll be fighting for books we loved. There can't be any other outcome. We'll be fighting for a book that, no matter what others say about it, a bad review an opinion from one of the other jurors, when we read them, we just felt our objections were disabled totally in favor of just this. Wow, that's really doing a lot for me. I'm forgetting that I'm a juror. I'm just a reader with his breath held now.
Take a couple more questions from the floor.
We have
and
a
then I've
question at
got
the back right
one or
here.
two, and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah.
I hope I'm not a little too off point, but it's kind of a fan question. I've so enjoyed a fairly new Canadian author named Laurie Lansons. She's done 3 books, and she's about to release her 4th. And I'm just wondering if you folks are familiar with her and you think there's a chance she's going to get on the Giller nomination thing?
If she's not on the 13,
Not this year.
oh, later.
Are you familiar with her?
Did she publish a book this year?
No, it was
No,
last year.
last year.
She's done 3, yeah.
Okay, what are the names of them?
Rush Home Road and
Okay.
Girls and The Wives' Tale.
Yeah, actually, yes. Yes, I have. Yes, I am familiar with that. I will never be a juror again. You heard that, Jack. So it is up to the future. I love the future. It's completely indeterminate. So of course, there's always a chance in the future. The future is open.
Did you want to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that it's a prize that's picked. I mean, there's so many different kinds of books that have won this prize, like just wildly different. So, I mean, I like to think there's a chance for anything to win the prize.
If you look at the list of who's won this prize, it really is a very diverse list.
It is very,
the books
very
are
diverse.
madly different from each other, so which is quite inspirational, actually, looking at that list. A couple more. You have somebody here?
We have someone right over here.
Did you ever worry about the fatigue of reading so many books affecting your judgment in the way that, like a teacher marking a stack of essays, the first one gets a top mark and the one on the bottom, not so much, whether it deserves it or not?
You have to take breaks, for sure.
No, absolutely. I think it helps that the books come in different waves, so that there are natural breaks between your reading periods. But you do have to take breaks in your reading just to make sure that that's, that's not happening, that you're not ending up hating everything just because, you feel like, I'm being forced to read this. So I feel like I read a lot of kind of, a lot of nonfiction kind of in between certain things, or, even just, reading an issue of the New Yorker for a day, would kind of refresh things.
Yeah, I read some non-Giller novels. I mean, I even let myself go to reading a whole other novel because it seemed so important to just sort of forget the index of that risk of grading on a curve and seeing them all only in terms of one another. This snapshot, this year in Canadian literature. I wanted to also be remembering just what it was to just read for interest and read novels per se. That index seemed to me important to keep alive.
I read a book called Humans That Went Extinct. Puts it in perspective. Once upon a time, there were no novels. The Neanderthals did not have any novels. Apparently, they had flutes.
Did they have prizes for flutes?
This we don't know. We do not know whether they had any prizes for flutes. Bet they did.
So my question is actually to the authors on the jury. I'm a little bit hyperventilating just being here, especially with John and everyone. I met him before, but how do you deal with people who admire you like me so much and are like just so happy to be here?
Oh,
That's very sweet.
we're very happy that you're happy.
Yeah. It reminds us to feel obliged to do something pathetically human, like picking our nose in public or something. help you also with that, probably.
Let's take one from the back. Is there some? Yeah, and then we'll. Yes.
Hey, thank you for taking my question. Margaret, earlier you alluded to like a certain joviality or like a positive perkiness to the books that are often selected this award.
I had a positive perkiness.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
I strive for that.
And I guess that's my question.
It's not always easy.
I hear you. Do you think a sense of resolution or being uplifting or hopeful is important to art at large, or kind of if it makes you feel really
You're asking me.
Not you. I guess the panel, but you know what I mean? Like, does it have to make you feel good for it to be a good book?
Okay,
Apparently
so
not.
right. Apparently not. Yeah. Okay. So, no, but in general, just the act of writing is an act of optimism, no matter what the content, because by writing you're assuming a future reader, which is a pretty optimistic thing to assume. You're also assuming you're going to finish your book, which on some days seems wildly optimistic. And then you're assuming somebody's going to publish it, which is, at the beginning anyway, quite a stretch. And then you assume that somebody's going to actually read it. And then you assume that they're going to understand it and like it. And those are a lot of very optimistic things that you are assuming just by putting finger to keyboard.
Thank you for that answer, and thank you for the kind words, and actually thank you all for coming out. This is the first time we've done this, and it's sort of a strange animal to meet and do this on stage when there isn't an announcement till tomorrow. So we're really grateful that people came out. I've got a couple questions for you. First of all, just out of curiosity, how many people here, once the shortlist is announced, are the kind of people who will search for and get those 5 books?
Oh, wonderful.
So this is the kind of indication of how powerful the Giller Prize and or Canada Reads can be. When we get those shortlists, it really does make a difference. And I thought you sort of set the subtext of the evening really beautifully, Margaret, when you talked about the fact that it's a really great year. And I'd end off with a question for each of you. And Jonathan, my question to you would be, you've sat for the last few months with a lot of quality Canadian fiction. What is your sense of the state of Canadian fiction today?
Well, I mean, I think you can't do something like this. And I remember this feeling a very comparable one from doing the U.S. National Book Award, that you have blinders on that you haven't realized, because your own book locating instinct is, there are all sorts of pre-conscious decisions you're making. So suddenly when you're presented with an entire snapshot of what's happened in a year, you're looking at books that you would have sorted against without even noticing that you've done so. So you just really feel humbled at how many different writers are trying so many worthy things so sincerely. And then, of course, the inverse, the crueler thought is, it doesn't all work. So many worthy attempts, so engaging, and so much optimism of the kind that Margaret was describing, and then the deep, deep challenge of bringing off these things, making it work, and how precious it is when it does occur. I don't think a country as diverse, as geographically, sprawling, as just simply as rich as Canada. Never mind that the population isn't the equal of the U.S. It seems to me no national literature that you could summarize with any general remark would be much of a national literature at all. So the primary experience is of the diversity. How many different things in this culture there are to feel and think about and want to write about? How different some of the regional voices can be from one another, and how lively, how really it is a living thing. Yeah.
Nicely said. Just a very quick supplemental, just based on what you said. It occurs to me that do you at all, have the three of you discussed an attempt to maintain that diversity when it comes to the long list or the short list? I mean, is there ever, the questions come up like, well, we can't do that because that would be 5 books from Montreal, or
No.
something like that?
No, that is not the mandate, and we didn't do that.
Yeah, I would expect
And
that.
we
But the answer to me no
didn't
is-
even do boys and girls.
I see. My final question to you would be: it was less than 2 years ago that you won this prize. What would you say to the people to the authors that end up on the short list tomorrow? What would you tell them, having been through what you've been through, about how to approach the month before the prize is handed out?
I guess I would say that it's going to be a hectic time, but just enjoy it. I feel like it was it was in such a fog the whole time. I feel like there was there's so many interviews and just so much attention, and I felt quite inundated, and looking back, I feel like, okay, I should have just maybe rolled with it a bit more. It's a wonderful time, and it's this is a prize that is it's just sort of it's the premier prize. It garners a lot of attention, and so yeah, just enjoy that experience, and the celebration of your work, and enjoy talking to new readers, because you will undoubtedly get new readers. Embrace that whole experience.
And a final question to you, Margaret. You started off tonight saying that you didn't necessarily want to be on the jury, but Jack coaxed you into it. And I know you were probably coaxed. What's that? Ordered you. But it probably had something to do with the fact that you care about this prize, and it is the 20th anniversary of the Giller Prize. Maybe you can reflect on why it means so much to you and what it means to the literary world in Canada.
All right, let's go way, way back. Once upon a time, there was only one literary prize in Canada, and that was the Governor General's Award. And once upon a time, there was no internet. Once upon a time, there were no public readings. Once upon a time, there were no book tours, and once upon a time, there were no book festivals. So this culture that has arisen over the past 50 years really grew up from not nothing, but from a substrate that very few Canadians were aware of. So even in 1972, when I published that book, Survival, I did it because people in this country didn't know they had a literature. So a lot of the effort that has gone in has been to make those facts publicly known and to make the writers publicly known. And when the Giller was set up, and it was when Mordecai Ritzler was still alive, and I know that he was a great help to Jack, they said, let's do it in style. Let's make this visible. Let's bring the writers out from under the damp logs where they spend most of the time and put them in a spotlight and celebrate them in a public way. And that's one of the reasons that it became so successful. It wasn't a halfway thing. It was all out, and it became became broadcast, written about, and televised, and watched. So when you compare now to, say, 1960, it's just a completely different scene, and the Giller has made a huge contribution to that. Huge.
What a lovely way to end off. Let's just give a big round of applause to these incredible jurors and great authors: Jonathan Lethem, Essie Dugin, Margaret Atwood. Shortlist will be announced tomorrow. If you haven't already gone to cbc.ca/books, it's a great place that's got all things books, cbc.ca/books, and we'll have the shortlist there, and we'll be giving away books there as well as soon as it gets announced tomorrow. So thank you so much for coming. I know there's going to be some signing happening.
Well, we have the pre-signed copies, but first, thank you to all of you for your questions, and thank you to our wonderful host tonight, Jack Gomeshi. A big round of applause for our jury and for John hosting a wonderful night.